Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are getting off the Bruce train tonight, though I'm sure he will come up. We are on the comedy train, the country music train, the Broadway train, the little bit of everything. And I got to get this out of the way. My guest is Steve Young. I am Jesse Jackson, not the two you may think we are. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Yes, I've gone through my life, as have you, I'm sure, fielding humorous remarks that you've heard many, many times. I've actually been asked for autographs by people who, in their good-hearted confusion, decided I was the famous football player. And then I have to let them down gently. But I'll give you the autograph, though, and you can see
Yeah.
the sort of worry on their face. Do I have to go through with this now and get
Yeah.
this guy's autograph that I don't want? But I do hope that between the comedy stuff and the film stuff and the music stuff I've been doing, just maybe somewhere out in the world, people are starting to say to the other Steve Young, can this be right? I saw you were putting out an album of sort of alt country music and no, I don't know what that is. I don't know who that is. Everyone's asking me about that now. So
Oh,
probably a little more possibility of confusion for me than for you.
I want that so much now, right?
Uh-huh.
I just want that just once. Someone to come up and tell Steve Young, hey, didn't you do an album, right?
Yeah, and
That's funny.
you were in this documentary and you've been
Yeah.
in short films. So what's going on?
Yeah.
No, no. Mm.
Well, I'm so happy you're here. You've kind of given a little introduction, but go ahead and tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I am a comedy writer by trade. I worked for the Letterman show for 25 years. I also did a little bit of work for the Simpsons, various other TV shows. Since the Letterman show ended, I've taken some very interesting twists and turns, which in some ways is emblematic, I think, for a lot of people in the 21st century where old certainties fall away and you have to reinvent yourself. So I was the subject of a wonderful documentary film called Bathtubs Over Broadway about my strange record collection. I have written and acted in some short films now. I've started writing songs and even put out an album and venturing out onto stages occasionally to try out my songs. So for many years, I was what I called an indoor cat. And I was in the Letterman ecosystem, and I went to the same place every day and did not exactly the same every day, but for a long time, that was the gig. And it was great. And I was well suited to it. And I'll always be grateful for that. But the last decade has been, what do you do when those guardrails of what your life is about go away? And you have to say, well, I still have ideas and creative impulses and things I would like to show the world. How do I do that? So that's what it's all been lately.
So I don't know if I'm going to ask you one of the most unique questions, but I don't think you get this too often.
Right?
I do another podcast called Perfectly Good Podcast. John Hyatt from Alphabetical, every John Hyatt song from A to Z.
Uh,
John was an often guest on David Letterman. Do you have any John Hyatt stories?
I wish I did. The way my life was set up at the Letterman show, I had almost no connection to the guests.
Okay.
The writers was a department, the talent booking people and producers, that was another department. I almost never was even down in the studio while the show was being taped. So the short answer is no.
Okay,
No,
that's
no good
fair.
stories.
That's
Sorry.
that it is I think that's kind of interesting, right? Because this is it was your day gig. Even though it was a night gig, it was your day gig, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It, we get into the office in the morning. It was an office job. You get into work. It was a bizarre office job because you had to come in and think of funny bits and script them up and produce these pieces and race to the finish line every afternoon because the show taped at like 4:30 in the afternoon. And then it was carefully edited and tweaked and then it would be out on the air that night. But no, we
Yeah.
were almost never there. in real time. Once we did a show at 4:30 in the morning as a stunt, and
Wow.
that was like the one very memorable time I can remember that, wow, this is not like a day job at all, is it? But yeah, usually
Yeah.
it was just go to the office, be funny, go home.
What's I think's got to be interesting is the idea of 5 days a week, right? Like Tuesday morning, you got to start fresh, right? Wednesday morning, got to start fresh
Yeah, that was a
because, go ahead. Right.
you might have stunk up the place on Tuesday and had no good ideas, but Wednesday morning it was a blank slate again, and you might come in having the best idea you've ever had. And that promise and peril of the blank page was always there. You could always be on the verge of your stroke of genius, or you might always be ready to fall flat on your face. But that kind of writing life and TV life is so different. And the music industry also, things take years to get through the pipelines of some of these things, whether it's a big movie or producing an album or whatever. We were producing things and putting them out on the air the same day. It was just very different life than a lot of creative people ever see.
One of the things I thought was interesting is John Oliver was being interviewed, and he talked about when he moved from the Daily Show to his HBO show. He said, we mistakenly thought because we were only doing one show a week, that would not be as a high, you know, pressure time, but it was. It still is. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the old adage about, oh, if you have a 4-lane highway and you expand it to an 8-lane highway to relieve the traffic, more traffic will come. And it
Yes.
will just keep filling up every available space and time and opportunity for new ideas and revisions. As much time as you got, you will, if you're smart, not rest on your first take and just try to make it better till the last minute.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, talk to me, Steve. I always like to start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? And what kind of music was your family listening to when you were younger?
Yeah, I grew up in a town in Massachusetts called Pepperell, which is a ways outside of Boston up toward the New Hampshire border. Quite rural in some ways, but sort of at the edge of the Boston suburbs. But my brother and I lived in a world of fields and forests and going exploring along the old railroad tracks and the river and all that. And the home music life, I think about this a lot more now that I've been making music and wondering what strands of influence secretly or consciously have crept into what I've done. But my parents were pretty young. They were only in their mid 20s. They're in their 20-ish when I was born in the mid 60s. So they were very much of an age to absorb the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, all that, but they did like some country music, Willie Nelson, Marty Robbins, Statler Brothers, the Carpenters. They were not hard rock people. But then, I'm a rebellious teenager, darn it. Where are the Doors and where are Led Zeppelin? And I'm going to get a hold of some Aerosmith and all that. So threw all that into the pot. Eventually found my way to Chuck Berry and Muddy Waters and all the Chicago blues, but also I really loved the movie Amadeus, and so I got into Mozart, which is an interesting
Yeah.
left turn, and then eventually bluegrass, and then classic country like Buck Owens and Merle Haggard and things like that. So I hope that I'll keep adding chunks to the stew pot that I'm boiling here. But yeah, I think it was in some ways not that unusual, but it might have a few odd ingredients in it.
So I I've been doing this for a while and I see trends. And one of the trends in a over exaggeration, but I get two kinds of guests, Steve. The ones that liked their parents' music and just expanded their horizons as they got older. They, picked up new music. And the others that said, I can't stand my parents' music. And then when they turned 35, go, that Johnny Cash guy that my dad liked? He's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, sounds like you were expanding and finding your path, right?
Yeah, I'm not, I don't think I was really rebelling against my parents' musical taste, although there was perhaps a little bit too much of the easy listening FM
Yes,
radio station in the house. But yeah, we had like the Simon and Garfunkel Greatest Hits album,
sure.
very good, powerful stuff to put into a young brain. It is interesting. Like for years, I thought, well, like rock and roll, a little Mozart, and then the
Yeah.
country stuff started creeping back in, and I was remembering, yeah, my mother had some of this, and it must have been. You know what is the weirdest direct influence I can remember is at age 4, I loved the Beverly Hillbillies, and every episode begins and ends with Flatt and Scruggs playing that theme song,
Yes.
and like 35 years later, I stumbled on Flatt and Scruggs and oh my God, this is the stuff at the base of my brain from when I was a tiny little kid. Yeah, that hard driving banjo stuff. Yeah, I just thought I almost forgot that this is a key part of it for me.
So I'm going to switch sides just for a moment. And I'm going to go back to more of your music, but were you a house of readers since you became a writer? Was there a lot of reading in the house?
Yes, although like my father was and is very interested in history, and there were many shelves of books about American history and World War II and the Civil War, and so a firm grounding in nonfiction like that. My mother did like some things like Stephen King, which I got very interested in also, and
Mhm.
still am a big fan of. Just pedal to the metal good stories with a big premise that you can get behind. So that was
Yeah.
definitely part of it.
And did you know you wanted to write?
I think I was pretty young when I had some flair for, age appropriate sixth grade scribbling. And, you get grown-ups starting to say, oh, you're going to be a writer someday. And they don't really know what that might mean if they're not writers, but they're telling you this and
Yeah.
you're absorbing it. And by the time I was in high school, I had this very vague idea that, oh, yeah, yeah, totally. I'm totally going to be a writer. I had no idea what I wanted to say. And really, very few 17-year-olds know what they want to say. You're just learning how to pick up the tools and sharpen the tools. You don't know what you're going to sculpt with it yet.
Mhm.
And it was really when I went off to college and found the humor magazine that light bulb went on over my head. I said, oh, okay, I think this is my thing.
Yeah, if you could, I often ask that question, Steve, if there was a road to Damascus moment when you discovered Bruce Springsteen or, the blues or something. So,
Or Damascus.
yes, and yes, so is there you talked about finding comedy, magazine. So tell me, was that a road to Damascus moment? And tell me a little more about it.
Very specifically, I was at Harvard as an undergrad, and they have this venerable humor magazine called the Harvard Lampoon, and any number of brilliant, influential comedy minds have come out of it over the years. And I thought, oh, I'll try out for this magazine. And you had to put in some samples, and people on the staff would write notes on your samples. I wrote a couple of samples and turned them in and went back and looked a few days later, and there were notes on the back saying, "Oh my God, who are you? Where did you come from? This is high octane stuff." Conan O'Brien, president of the magazine, was one of these people writing great on the back of my thing. I thought, I think I just found my thing.
Oh,
I
how
just I
fun.
think I found what I'm supposed to be doing.
Do you remember what it was about?
I had two initial pieces. One was a biblical parody, sort of written in the style of a King James Bible Old Testament story with a clever twist to it and fun details. The other one was called Rock and Roll Rewriter, which was all about a world in which rock stars bring this rewriter early drafts of their songs, which are a mess. And in my voice, I'm the rewriter. Okay, the Beatles came in and they had this thing called "I desire to hold the lower part of your arm," and I said,
Mhm.
okay, there's something here, but let me work on this. I'll whip it into shape. So it's all yeah, classic
That
rock stuff. reverse engineered from the least appealing, overwrought, clunky version. And that did well, and that got in the magazine. But that made me think, okay, I got something going on here. And I was terribly green. I couldn't tell a good idea from a bad idea for many years. Maybe some would say I still can't. But I had some early encouragement from people I admired, and I thought, I don't have any better ideas for what to do with a career. I think I'm going to try to do this because I started hearing, oh, so and so who graduated 2 years ago writes for SNL now, or so and so works for the Letterman show. And I thought maybe that's what I should do, partly because it suits me and partly because I don't have any other prospects.
So, Steve, when you got accepted into Harvard, what was writing going to be your major? What were you thinking originally you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, this is the very nebulous quote unquote writer stage without really knowing what
Yeah,
about writing might be my thing. And I could tell pretty quickly I was not going to be really suited to academia. I
yeah,
could take classes and read books and write papers, but I was not on fire about talking about John Donne or Beowulf, or I did like Charles Dickens. Just those are like good stories that absorbed me,
yeah,
but I don't think I need to be in academia. It's possible in an alternate universe I could have wandered into advertising. Many of the same impulses and muscles you use at a place like the Letterman show could easily be transposed to the more fun version of advertising. And we all know great advertising jingles and memorable
yeah.
campaigns that clearly were done by very smart, funny people. I could have been one of those people, maybe.
Did so after you graduated, what was the next step in your career?
Oh, a couple of years in the wilderness, bartending in Boston, writing a few freelance humor pieces here and there. There was the National Lampoon, which was a good outlet for me to try a few things out. But it took a couple of years to get any traction in big time TV. Eventually, I got my foot in the door at a place called Not Necessarily the News, which was an HBO show based
I
out of
remember
LA.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So that was my first real TV credit, and that kind of it was a mixed bag. I didn't really want to live in LA. I stayed on a friend's sofa for a while. I didn't end up staying for very long. They had under budgeted the writers and had to let some people go. But it was all right. I had a real credit by now, and so that helped.
And so did you kind of know, like at this point, you're like, I'm sticking with this for a while?
It's a wonderful and terrible thing not to have any better ideas than the path you've started on because
Yeah,
uh, yeah, I didn't have a family that was telling me you really should go to law school or my
yeah,
buddy can get you in at this tech startup. There was nothing like that going on in my life.
yeah.
So there was no distraction from trying to go down this wobbly path I had started on.
So you're probably tired of asking, but I feel like I have to. How did you end up working for David Letterman?
I was in New York in, I guess, early 1990. I was working at the Comedy Channel, which was the predecessor to Comedy Central.
Right?
My second TV job. And now I was in New York and knew people who knew what was going on. And people were saying several writers are leaving the Letterman show. Now's the time to put in your writing sample. So there was this stampede from would-be comedy writers from all points of the compass. But I had some good samples, and the head writer read my stuff and thought he saw the makings of a good voice for the show, even if I was still terribly green and young. And I had watched the Letterman show probably less than anyone else who'd ever applied to it. But he saw something there that he thought would work for them. So I got a call one day in like spring of 1990 from Steve O'Donnell, head writer of the Letterman show, still a dear friend, who said, yeah, liked your submission. Maybe you could come up to the office and walk around, meet some people. Maybe Mr. Letterman will say hello. So at that point, I felt like it's mine to lose. If I come across as a psychopath who doesn't bathe, this could all go away. But if I acquit myself well on the in person visit, maybe it'll work out. And that's how it worked. Yeah.
So, Steve, I see that, and you mentioned earlier, you have an eclectic album collection. And so you kind of said that tongue in cheek. And I'm seeing here on IMDb a little something called Bathtubs Over Broadway. So, talk to me a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about your musical journey.
Okay, well, so many pieces of this puzzle fit together. The comedy led to Bathtubs Over Broadway, which also comedy led to the music because by the end of the Letterman show, I was becoming a decent guitar player and was writing little songs and jingles for the show. But the bathtubs over Broadway thing, early in my Letterman tenure, I was asked by Steve O'Donnell, again the head writer, if I could be in charge of a long-running bit on the show called Dave's Record Collection, which, if you've watched Letterman in the old days, you'll remember real unintentionally funny record albums he'd hold up. You'd hear a little selection of Bobby Orr tells you how to play hockey or teach your parakeet to talk or whatever. And you'd hear a sample and he'd have a joke. I was the one going out to find records at the used record stores and thrift shops around New York. And I began coming back with records that deeply puzzled me. I found one, then another, then another. Souvenir record albums, private pressings from company conventions and sales meetings at which an original musical had been performed about working for Continental Insurance or BF Goodrich Tires, all for just the dealers and salesmen at these companies or the electric utility executives at the big GE conference, not to be played on the air, not for public commercial use. These shows were not for the public. So these were musicals, and I knew nothing about Broadway musicals, really. Growing up, that was not in the house at all. But I just thought there should not be a musical about selling and servicing diesel engines, for God's sake. But here it was, and it was done with great sincerity and surprising panache and production value. I was mesmerized. I thought, not only shouldn't this exist, it does exist, and it's kind of great. How many more of these are there? So that was the beginning of the journey, which has lasted to this day. I'm still collecting these records. A friend of mine and I wrote a book about these industrial shows, and then a wonderful filmmaker named Deva Whisenant made this documentary that I'm the main subject of, Bathtubs Over Broadway. And that took up a lot of my time post Letterman, the production of that, and then going around to film festivals and promoting it. So that is, yes, one of the strangest record collections anyone has ever assembled. All records that I should not own or be able to listen to, that I have snatched back from the edge of the abyss.
That is awesome. And I would ask you some of your oddest, but I don't think we have time because they're
Oh,
all a little odd, aren't they?
they're all a little odd. I'll just show you a couple. Xerox, 1963, a musical called Take It From Here about the introduction of the great new, what is it? Oh yes, the 813 model in the fall of 63. So they had a musical for the salesman about the new Xerox machine. There's uh, this is the Continental Insurance one I mentioned, My
Yeah.
Insurance Man, 1968. So this was all sort of heart of post-war American economic juggernaut, mid 50s, started to die out late 70s, but I couldn't believe that these were real. They all seemed like something comedy writers must have made up, but they were real. And yes, some of them are miserable. Some of them are god awful. Many of them are in the middle and are okay. But the best ones, I still listen to this insurance record and go, oh my God, these people are geniuses. So, so that just shouldn't have happened, but I stumbled into it and I was the right person at the right time to, along with a few other collectors, salvage this extremely ephemeral art form that really does give a great glimpse into 20th century American life and culture.
Yeah, because talk about a niche audience, right? I'm reminded of, and I can't do it by memory, but Steve Martin making the plumber's joke, right? And going, oh, bump, 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 bump. And He goes, "Oh, this was supposed to be for the plumbers, right? You would have gotten that joke." Uh, it is,
He
you know,
did actual industrial musicals, by the way. I have some grainy footage of him doing a steel case office supply furniture industrial show in the late 80s. So, yes, people are
wow.
constantly going back and forth from the light to the shadow and back to the light, but the real world and the secret world.
You know, I always thought that would be cool that, you know, you've got this corporate gig, but on part-time for a hobby, you play music, and for someone to go, "Hey, let's do a show about the new collator that we've got." That's wonderful. I will have
Yeah.
to, where can we find the documentary?
Bathtubs Over Broadway is on Amazon and Apple, I believe. It might be on YouTube as well. It's
Okay.
been on Netflix and it goes off, then it comes back. Never
Okay.
sure where it is, but it's definitely out there. It's a wonderful film, and I can say that wholeheartedly because I did not make the film. I'm in it, but I'm not the filmmaker. And it people really were unsure. It was hard to market because people have literally never heard of this topic because we were not supposed to hear about this
Yeah.
entire genre of show business. So you say to somebody it's about industrial musicals and they go, "What? And you
Yeah.
mean like commercials?" Well, no. Commercials you and I were supposed to hear. You and I were not ever supposed to hear the Xerox musical.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
love that we were just not supposed to know about it, and that made me want it all the more.
Yeah, because it's a corporate gig. I'm a big fan of Penn and Teller,
Oh
and
yeah.
and Penn will talk about, doing corporate gigs and showing that, right? So I just think that's hilarious. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's always
So,
been a huge part of any creative person's economic foundation. I know so many people who are filmmakers and musicians, and a lot of their day-to-day life of the day job is, creating videos for this company or that company, or
mhm.
putting together music cues for the big meeting or whatever. It's all over the place.
So you talked about your you've lost your guardrails or your
Yeah.
structure. That's my words, not yours. So, how did you decide? What led you to creating music? And share me a little bit about that.
Music had been simmering
Mm.
for quite a while. I'd had an acoustic guitar like in college, and I knew a dozen chords, but I wasn't really pursuing it. It was about 20 years ago that I decided to get serious and look into getting real guitar lessons. And I found a wonderful teacher here in Manhattan who got me started on finger picking. And I found after a little while, oh, I have a real facility for this. And she said, "You're absorbing everything I'm giving you." After a while, she passed me off to a higher level teacher, a great guy named Woody Mann. Unfortunately, no longer with us, but he was always touring the world and Europe and Japan and doing concerts and workshops, ragtime, country blues, jazz. And he and I had a lot of fun together. And he saw something in me that he said, "Well, if you'd started this." Uh, 30 years earlier, you'd be a lot further along, obviously, but you have an ear and you have an imagination. I had one, I wouldn't know if I'd call it a secret weapon, which was that Letterman-esque sense of humor. Lots of people write lovely songs that are very sincere, and we can all list 100 songs that are not at all funny that we love. I'm not exclusively writing funny songs, but many of them have that little twist of dark, absurd humor that informs a lot of what I do. So by the time the Letterman show was ending, I'm starting to experiment with songwriting. And I was going around the country with Bathtubs Over Broadway on the film festival circuit. And I met a man in Nashville, Music City. And I knew Nashville was like this very closed ecosystem. You can't just walk into Nashville and say, "Hey, I write funny songs. Who wants to give me a record deal?" Nobody wants to give you a record deal. But I met a guy there, a guy named John Shane, and he's sort of a financial professional by day, but a very funny and talented. He has an alter ego called Merle Hazard, who does country songs about interest rates and central banking and other very funny topics that you wouldn't think should be in bluegrass songs. But he took a shine to some of my little scraps of early songwriting that I showed him and said, "Oh, we got to get you hooked up with some people here and figure out some recording sessions." So if it wasn't for him, none of this really would have gotten very far. So, as usual, I'm sure this is true of just about anyone you'd talk to, perhaps even Mr. Springsteen. The right place at the right time with somebody who sees something in you that they want to encourage and can help you along the way. And so that's how I now have really professional sounding recordings to put out, is because of this great friend.
And what what are you putting out? Did you
I guess
start
you
out
call it.
just a song or two and then you decide maybe I want to do an album?
I had 6 songs out of the Nashville sessions, and I guess we'd call them alt country. Don't know how much you pay attention to the country world. There's
Yeah.
the ecosystem, that's the big money zone where the superstars
Yeah.
put out albums that are on the radio. That's really just a small part of the whole ecosystem. Everything
Right.
underneath that doesn't get to be in stadiums and on the satellite radio all the time. That's the catch-all term, seems to be alt country.
Yeah.
And there are 1,000 sub flavors of that. So I'll say I'm alt country. I have frighteningly legitimate musicians playing on these songs and sounding to my ears like A plus. Like, how did I get so lucky that these geniuses are on my records? But yeah, they're weird topics for songs. Like one of the ones that people seem to really like is called Fitted Sheet, and it's all about the agonies of trying to fold a fitted sheet, trying to put a fitted sheet back on the mattress the right way and not have it have bumps and bubbles and all that. And then it takes a turn into maybe this is a metaphor for just being okay with the imperfections of life. And so it
Nice.
circles around to, it has this funny start, but then gets a little bit profound.
Mhm. Do have you thought about in quote unquote doing more serious writing, or this is your muse right now?
The muse takes different forms. And sometimes when I've been in emotional turmoil, a
Hmm.
song has come out that is not a fitted sheet type song. And it is all about matters of the heart and the agony and all that. And I have one of those on this record that came out last year. The record is called, the album's called Broken Heart Insurance. So you can already tell that there's some personal turmoil here, but also for the most part with a funny twist. But yeah, there's one song on there called When I Say Hello that is, maybe it's a little bit clever, but it is not funny. It is about somebody in pain.
In so Broken Heart Insurance
Yep.
available on Amazon Music. I just saw. Where else
Yeah,
can you find it?
Spotify and
Yeah.
Apple and all the usual suspects. They all go everywhere now. And I've got 2 really fun and beautifully produced music videos that are on YouTube. If you go to my YouTube channel, Steve Young World,
Okay. You mentioned, are you performing live?
I'm I'm starting to step out a little more. I've done a little bit of it. I do these industrial musical shows with film clips in which I do a song or two on guitar, but they're not my songs. They're about Scott Paper Cups or something. So
Yeah.
that's fun, but I don't want to hide behind other people's odd material forever. I've started doing some songwriter open mics, taking these songs I'm working on in and trying them out in front of people. And that's a little, it's nerve-wracking, but it's exactly what I want to be doing. I'm planning a show for New York City at the end of March in a little venue downtown where I'll be doing a good solid batch of my own material and some little comedy bits as well. But yeah, trying to make this just part of my portfolio as I get up in front of people and just do it because I'm the king of my living room right now. Look, I got a guitar right there. I got other guitars over there. I can sit here all day and play the guitar, but that's really not going to make me progress the way I want to. So I'm getting out more and doing more in public.
How big of a change was it, Steve, being behind the scenes for all those years, writing for someone else to tell the jokes? Though I'm sure, cracking up people. I often joke that when I have a co-host on my podcast, often I'm just working to try to make my co-host laugh, right?
Uh,
Like the audience is beside the book. So I'm sure there was a little bit of that in the writer's room trying to crack each other. But how different is it that you are now in the spotlight?
I think about that, and it's a profound change and one I did not see coming for a long time. I had done a little bit of stand up, a little bit of improv, mostly up in Boston before I came to New York. And I liked it. And I thought there is something here I could keep going with. But once I got in the Letterman writer's room, I thought, game over. What else? What else do I need to do? That's all I aspired to. And for a long time, I was a backroom person. But then two things happened. I usually say two things happened. Number one, years went by where my voice became more confident, more idiosyncratic, more sharpened and honed just by being around funny people every day for decades. I became the best possible version of who I could be with my comedic voice. And then I just started discovering things I wanted to tell people about. And that was the industrial musicals thing with the corporate show tunes and all that that's in the documentary Bathtubs Over Broadway. I do shows now where I come out and tell people, and some of them have seen the documentary, many of them have not. And I say, have I got something for you? I found something so crazy. I cannot wait to tell you about it. And that feeling propelled me out of the back room at a point when I was ready to use my own voice.
That's cool. I love this new career. And I'm sure this is if you had told 22-year-old Steve, right? You're like, what the hell are you talking about?
I play that game all the time. Like if Steve Young from January 2015 could see what was going on with Steve Young January 2025, there would be a lot of bewilderment. There have been a lot of changes in my life, personal and professional, but I would have to say, okay, apparently my arms and legs and eyes and ears still work, number one. Oh, look, I've got some guitars. That's fun. Apparently, I'm talking to people about comedy and music, and I'm going places and getting up on stage. This sounds mildly terrifying, but it's got to be good. It's got to be a good development.
Yeah, I guess that's true, Steve. We don't even have to go back to young Steve.
Yeah,
Just
10
just
years
10
ago.
years ago.
Yeah, 10 years
Wow.
ago, the Letterman show was in its final months. And the early work had been started on the documentary, but I didn't know when it was going to come out or what it would be like. I was confident it would be something good, but I thought, and I was naive about the entertainment business. I thought, oh, I've worked at Letterman for a long time. I've done work for the Simpsons. Oh, I'll be fine. Turns out it doesn't necessarily mean you transition smoothly to other jobs. And I have had other jobs. I don't think any job is ever going to last 25 years again.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of little short term things. Sometimes I do corporate gigs, actually writing comedy or even lyrics for some company's event, which is kind of funny for me now. But
I bet.
I'm consulting and writing on an animated show that's in development. So I have my foot in that world still, but it is not like the steady year in, year out Letterman world was. So
Hmm.
yes, I've got a lot of motivation as well as time to work on these
Hmm.
other
What is something you haven't done but you want to?
something I haven't done that I want to. Well, one thing that is coming up is I'm going to get out on stage and it's going to be an evening of Steve Young music and comedy. And I'm very comfortable doing an evening of industrial musicals, but that's me curating something that I didn't do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump off the cliff and do something that, attention, please, world. I need 100 minutes of your time, please, because I'm going to show you what I do. So
Yeah.
that's grew up a sort of waspy New Englander to ask for people's time and attention for something you did can feel a little odd because it's just like, well, we're supposed to not toot our own horn and be modest and not insist that people look at us. So a little bit of a cultural odd thing there. So that's one thing I'm doing for sure.
That's awesome. So, what should I have asked you, Steve, that I haven't?
Oh, what should you have asked me? You did very well,
Well,
I've got to
thank you,
say.
sir.
Um, do you have, I'll ask you, and then you can turn it back on me. The quote unquote famous Jesse Jackson, does he have a middle name that you share, or is it only the?
I do not know. I was in Las Vegas once, and it was at, I can't remember the casino, maybe the Wynn, and someone said, "Look, it's Jesse Jackson. It's Jesse Jackson." I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, no, no, Jesse, it's Jesse Jackson. And so there was Reverend Jackson walking across the thing, and so give me your phone, give me your phone. So someone grabbed my phone, and I went and I said, Reverend Jackson, and he stopped, and you could tell, like, why are you bugging me? And and I'm showing him my driver's license to go, I'm Jesse Jackson, and all he sees is you're from Texas. This was when the second Bush was president.
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, 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 my name's Jesse Jackson. And he's like, yeah, yeah. He wasn't amused by it at all, but he did take a picture. And
Okay.
so I do have every once in a while go, Jesse met Jesse. And a couple of my friends will go, isn't that like matter and antimatter meeting?
Uh-huh.
So yes, I have had, my wife and I got married in 84. And in 86, we were calling to make a reservation for somewhere, and the person in Austin said, Reverend Jackson, don't you have someone to make your reservations? And I said, I wish I was the Reverend. No, I'm a different Jesse Jackson. So yeah, it's my usual joke is I look different than I do on TV. You're
Hmm.
used to seeing me on a black and white set. And so I do not mind, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but when someone makes the joke and acts like they are the most clever person in the world and that no one has ever made that joke before, that irritates me a little. It doesn't make me mad. It's just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But if someone goes, I'm sure you're tired of Jesse Jackson jokes, then I want to hug them. Like,
Yeah.
that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a
You've
little selfish.
acknowledged it, and that's cool.
Yeah, I get a lot of that. Yeah, I loved how you played for the 49ers. I bet you get that all the time, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yes, I
But
do.
when people say that, oh, I bet I loved how you played for the 49ers, I say, funny story, actually. There was some mix up, and I actually did play in a couple of games by mistake. And if you look on the YouTube highlight reel, you can tell which games I was in. I was terrible.
I love it.
There you go.
All right. In a few minutes, I'm gonna ask you to tell us how people can reach you, how they can
Oh, yeah.
find the music and the book. But I end every podcast with what I call the Mary question. And
Right.
if you're a fan of Steve Young, if you were checking to hear the football player, I hope you stuck around. Steve's been a great guest. Jay Armstrong is a retired honors English teacher. When he was teaching, he would have his honors English students, he would give them the lyrics to Bruce's song Thunder Road. They would read the song as if it was a poem, talking about the themes Bruce explores, the imagery he does in the song, and then he would ask his class at the end of the day, did Mary get in the car? So, Steve, that is your question. Does
Right.
Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Okay. My understanding, see if I've got this remembered right. The lyrics begin, the screen door slams, Mary's dress waves. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
All right, and then there's this, that, and the other thing. I think she gets in the car because she needs to go to the hardware store and get a new hydraulic cylinder for the screen door. The screen door should not be slamming. The screen door should be closing gently. So get down to the hardware store, Mary, and it's probably like a $15 part. It will improve your life. You're tired of the slamming. See if you can put in, isn't that nice?
That is, if it is not the best Mary question, it's in the top 10.
All
Uh,
right, I'll take that. Top
yeah,
10 is a part of my life,
there
sure.
you go. Exactly. Thank you so much. Steve, if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm on many of the modern things that you have to be on. I have a website, steveyoungworld.com. That's sort of got all my different activities and news about the different music things and shows and all that. I could not get steveyoung.com. I bet some more famous Steve Young got that. But Steve Young World is kind of cool because I contain now a world with different continents of film and music and comedy and writing and all these different adventures. So Steve Young World, also on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Steve Young World. I've got some full-length music videos from songs from the Broken Heart Insurance album. I also have a shorts playlist. I write a lot of short, like 30-second or minute long funny songs and videos that I do. TikTok, is TikTok still alive this week? I
I
never
think
know.
they are.
I put my little bits on TikTok at Steve Young World. I don't feel like I'm exactly the TikTok person, but you know what? This is part of my new life, just trying new things, and come find me on TikTok. Sure, what could go wrong? The other thing, Instagram, I do have Pants Steve on Instagram, and that goes back to the days of the Letterman show gave everybody an email address. And because Dave Letterman's company is Worldwide Pants, everybody got a Pants email address. Pants Jim, Pants Betty, whatever. I was Pants Steve, and I've retained some vestiges of that. So Instagram, Pants Steve.
That is awesome. Steve, this was so much fun.
It
Thank you
was.
so much for joining me. I hope you had fun.
I did, and I'm first of all glad that I'm not a Bruce super fan. I am a fan.
Yeah.
I did have the Born to Run album and the Tunnel of Love and probably a few other ones. So I know kind of, the terrain of the greatest hits, but I'm pleased with myself that I was able to summon the beginning of Thunder Road properly.
I'm very impressed.
Yeah.
Yes, I am too. Yeah, well, thank you, my friend. Listeners, go to the website, go to the YouTube channel, heck, go to TikTok. Check it
Oh,
out. Give Steve some love. Everyone, please be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
thank you.